Caritamrita ki Shamaveta Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Daita Chanda Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda So before I read the verse and purport, there's a little paragraph that it just gives a précis of the chapter ahead of time, and that's actually got some very nice points in it. The summary of chapter 9 has been given as follows by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his Amrita Pravaha Bhasya. In the 9th chapter, the author of Caitanya Caritamrita has devised a figurative example by describing the plant of bhakti. He considers Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is known as Vishrambar, to be the gardener of this plant, because he is the main personality who has taken charge of it. As the supreme enjoyer, he enjoyed the flowers himself and distributed them as well. The seed of the plant was first sown in Navadip, the birth site of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and then the plant was brought to Purushottam Ketra, Jagannath Puri, and then to Vrindavan. The seed fructified first in Srila Madhavendra Puri, and then his disciple Sri Ishwar Puri. It is figuratively described that both the tree itself and the trunk of the tree are Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The devotees headed by Paramananda Puri and 8 other great sannyasis are like the spreading roots of the tree. From the main trunk there extend 2 special branches, Advaita Prabhu and Sri Nityananda Prabhu. And from those branches grow other branches and twigs. The tree surrounds the entire world, and the flowers of the tree are to be distributed to everyone. In this way, the tree of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu intoxicates the entire world. It should be noted that this is a figurative example, meant to explain the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki. So this meter is a little irregular, but I'll break it up slightly just to sound like the regular Bhagavad Gita. So each of those lines will be in half. Tam Srimad Krishna Caitanya Devang Vande Jagat Gurum Yasyanu Kampaya Swapi Mahabdim Santaret Sukham Tang Srimad Krishna Caitanya Devang Vande Jagat Gurum Yasyanu Kampaya Swapi Mahabdim Santaret Sukham. Tang Srimad Krishna Caitanya Devang Vande Jagat Gurum Yasyanu Kampaya Swapi Mahabdim Santaret Sukham. Tam, unto him, Srimad, with all opulence, Krishna Chaitanya Devam, unto Lord Krishna Chaitanya Dev. Bande, I offer obeisances. Jagat Gurum, the spiritual master of the world. Jasya, whose, Anukampaya, by the mercy of, Shwa Api, even a dog, Maha Abdim, great ocean, Santaret, can swim, Sukham, without difficulty. Translation: Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the spiritual master of the entire world, Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, by whose mercy even a dog can swim across a great ocean. Please repeat. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the spiritual master of the entire world, Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, by whose mercy even a dog can swim across a great ocean. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Sometimes it is to be seen that a dog can swim in the water for a few yards and then come back to the shore. Here, however, it is stated that if a dog is blessed by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he can swim across an ocean. Similarly, the author of Caitanya Caritamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraja Goswami, placing himself in a helpless condition, states that he has no personal power. But by the desire of Lord Chaitanya, expressed through the Vaishnavas and Madan Mohan Vigraha, it is possible for him to cross a transcendental ocean to present Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Oma Jnana Timidhandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chokshurun Mritam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest ignorance, but my spiritual master has forced open my eyes with the scalpel of knowledge. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto him. So, it's amazing that you could have an elevated soul like Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, but compare himself to a dog. In this case, a dog who's a poor swimmer, who has no hope of crossing an ocean. But by the mercy of the Vaishnavas, by the mercy of the spiritual master, by the mercy of his beloved deity, all things are possible. Even that dog can swim across the ocean. We know we sing every day, Yasya Prasada, Bhagavat Prasado, Yasya Prasada, Nagati Kutopi. Only by the grace of the spiritual master can one achieve the goal. Without that grace, one can achieve nothing. So it's described that whenever a Vaishnava undertakes an undertaking, even the beginning of a chapter, he will remind himself, I'm doing this by the grace only of the great devotees, the grace only of my spiritual master. One time Srila Prabhupada saw a press cutting sent from Germany. One devotee was there. And the press cutting was, of course, in German. But amongst all of the prose, he saw his name. He said, now I know you're going to be successful, because you're remembering your spiritual master. And Srila Prabhupada, conversely, would become very upset if he noticed his name was not printed on a pamphlet or something. That you're forgetful, and therefore you'll not have the potency to introduce others. So we should know this, that we have no qualifications of our own. Our qualification, as summed up by Srila Narottam Das Thakur in the prayer we just sang, is that we're so fallen, and Lord Krishna happens to be the savior of the fallen, therefore we're in the queue. Maybe we're trying to jump the queue, but somehow or other we are fit for receiving some mercy, because the Lord Chaitanya distributes without discrimination, without considering who is qualified, who is not qualified. It's quite extraordinary, really, and we should never forget this, that just by mercy alone we're there. So I thought I'd also comment on the gardening example that is mentioned here. We see many examples like this. In this case, Lord Chaitanya's sampradaya is compared to be like a tree. There are roots that need to be nurtured, there are fruits and there are flowers. The main fruit, of course, of the tree of Lord Chaitanya is Prema Pumata Mahan, love of Krishna as known by the inhabitants of Goloka. Aradhya Bhagavan, Rajesha Tanaya, Tadhama Vrindavanam. Ramir Kuchit Upasana Rajuvadu Vagena Yakalpita. Srimad Bhagavatam, Pramanam Amalam, Prema Pumata Mahan. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Matanidam Tatradana Napura. This is from Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. He describes that we worship Krishna of Vrindavan, Vrajesha Tanaya, the son of the king of Braj. Tadhama Vrindavanam, whose abode is Vrindavan. The most glorious form of worship is that which was extended by the cowherd damsels, the Vrajavadus. Srimad Bhagavatam is the spotless authority on everything, and Prema Pumata Mahan. Love of God is the supreme goal of life. These opinions, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes them as opinions, or the mindset of Sri Chaitanya. You won't find anything superior to this. It's a nice summary. If you like a credo, sometimes religious organizations try to distill everything down to a basic tenet of beliefs. That's exactly what that verse describes, the essence of Lord Chaitanya's instructions, his teachings.
Where do you find
I believe it's in a book called Sri Caitanya Mala Manjusha, but it's Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Srila Prabhupada would sometimes quote it, but it's one of the lesser known quotes. We also know that sometimes the Bhakti Lata Bij, our opportunity to develop Krishna consciousness, is also compared to be like a seed with a creeper, and the fruit is love of God. So these type of metaphors are quite frequent. This idea that we're given an opportunity, a seed is an opportunity, and we must care for that seed if it's going to grow healthily and deliver a fruit. There's a particular phrase, a Vedic aphorism that Srila Prabhupada used all the time. Phalena parichiyate. You can judge a thing by the fruit. So depending on what fruit comes, that gives you some insight as to what the nurture was like, what went into it, what seed was used. You get tomatoes, you know that there was a tomato seed, and there was probably some talking to the tomatoes, and there was some care and nourishment. You're not going to get cucumbers. Now this is a cause and effect metaphor, and it's actually quite a significant one when trying to understand Guru Parampara. Srila Prabhupada would say a dead man cannot preach. So if someone has the ability to attract others to Krishna consciousness, to enliven others in Krishna consciousness, to have all kinds of successful outcomes of preaching, phalena parichiyate, there's something very right with that individual. They've listened well. If they're going to be able to convince others of the truth of Krishna consciousness and speak authoritatively on Shastra, it's because they've studied, it's because they've listened well, it's because they've practiced well. If someone is teaching bogus things, they are just inventing and making it up, or they don't have any authoritative understanding, then it should be known. Either they were listening to the wrong source, or they just failed to study. I'm going to go through a few of these phalena parichiyate. Funny enough, Jesus actually more or less taught the same thing. You can judge a thing by its fruits, or as you sow, whatever you reap is what you've sown. So this is not unique to Krishna consciousness, this idea that the fruits are the primary indicator of the quality of a thing, of the effectiveness of a thing. So Srila Prabhupada, sometimes when talking about different religions, was very magnanimous. He wasn't at all narrow-minded and sectarian. In fact, I'm going to read a few verses from the second chapter of the first canto, which in many ways is a summary of everything to come, a summary of the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam. In fact, we know that the first canto begins with some questions by the sages, 6 questions, I believe, and those are answered initially in summary form in the second chapter. And then the rest of the Srimad Bhagavatam is the further exposition on those same questions. So Srila Prabhupada would regularly quote this when he was referring to whether different religions could bestow the fruits of love of God. Savai pungsam parodharmo jato bhakti radhoksaje ahoityukya pratihata yayatma suprasidati. The supreme occupation for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. So there's lots of cause and effect that's mentioned in here. Srila Prabhupada would often use it to say, if it evokes love of God that's unmotivated, without a hetu, without cause, without other motive to be accomplished, or hoituki, without interruption, then it's perfect. Now, of course, he's giving some criteria by which people can then assess, is that what various religious teachers are doing? It could be argued that if the religious teacher that you're listening to turns you into a terrorist, then probably there's something not quite right about what you're hearing from that person. It could be said that if the organization that propounds those teachings turns into a scandal-ridden organization, then there's some fruits there that merit concern. So Srila Prabhupada always taught us that we should be very careful from whom we hear, very careful in terms of who we surrender to, who we take guidance from. And we should, and the symptoms of those personalities are mentioned to us many times. Let me quickly finish the next two verses because they also make similar, very important points. Vasudevi Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janayatyashu Vairagyam Jnanam Cha Yadahoitakam. By rendering devotional service unto the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. So again, cause and effect. If we're practicing nicely, we should develop both knowledge and detachment. If we remain just as enthusiastic about material life as we were prior to taking up the process, something is wrong with our practice. If we're not actually starting to develop realizations, something is wrong with that practice. It's not that we expect it overnight, but 10 years in, 20 years in, 30 years in, one should be taking stock. Am I actually progressing? Srila Prabhupada would often quote, Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavat yakinchana sarvaigunas tatra samasute sara. That if you're progressing in Krishna consciousness, if you're developing bhakti, all the good qualities of the devas should manifest. And we have lots of lists. Tatikshava karunika, tolerant, merciful, suridasavadehinam, friendly to all. These are the qualities that we're supposed to be developing if we're progressing in Krishna consciousness. If we see that someone is still dealing in friends of enemies, has no tolerance, has no compassion or mercy, then we have to wonder, is their practice proper? Phalena parichiyate, are the results what we would expect? Or is there some other result that's coming out? The 26 qualities of a devotee would be another. And many of these things are actually repeating in some ways. But this idea that there should be some perceivable progress, some perceivable benefits in these things. If we're getting other results, then it means the anarthas are still there. The heart is not yet clear of those anarthas. It doesn't mean that we condemn someone who's just at the early stages of practicing. This is much more for self-scrutiny. Have I become free and indifferent to material nature, or do I remain very intrigued and allured by material nature, and so on? And then another cause and effect verse. Dharma swanistita pungsam vishvaksena katasuya notpadayed yadi ratim shrama eva hi kevalam. The occupational duties, the word dharma, a man performs according to his own position, are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke an attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead. This is a very important symptom of healthy development in spiritual life, that one has a taste or an attraction, one is eager to hear. In fact, when Krishna even witnesses that we're eager to hear, he gives us all assistance. That enthusiasm to imbibe the Lord's message, that openness to receive the Lord's message, Krishna is so pleased, he gives all assistance to that person. Shrinvatam swakata Krishna, punya shravana kirtana, hridyanta stoya bhadrani, vidhunoti saritsatam. He does the cleaning work. As long as we're not clean, our hearts are still filled with anarthas, our devotional service will be interrupted, will be unsteady, will be flinching is the word that Srila Prabhupada would sometimes use. The word used by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is anishtita bhakti. And we know at the other end of anartha nivritti, one achieves nishtha, steadiness, unwavering faith, unflinching faith. So we have to look at these things. All these symptoms are given. So the 6 different kinds of wavering devotional service are outlined in Madhurya Kadambini by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So we can directly perceive what our situation is. Yes, I'm unsteady in this way. So therefore let me apply myself to the process of cleaning the heart. Let me apply myself to the process of Krishna consciousness under the guidance of my spiritual master. So The process of following the spiritual master's instructions and rendering devotional service under his guidance is called bhajana kriya. It specifically refers to following. Bhajana kriya might just sound like acts of worship, but actually means under the guidance of the spiritual master, under the guidance of the spiritual teacher. Of course, it's not that we only have to have the one spiritual teacher. The benefits of a great society, like Srila Prabhupada has given us, is that we actually can have many devotional teachers, many shelters, many sources of guidance. But then we have to see, am I submitting? And as a result of that submission, as a result of the inquiries, are my doubts being cleared? One of the verses that is mentioned in the 11th canto, the second half, Shabde Parita Nishnatam. The spiritual master should be someone who's got such erudition and such realization in Shastra that they can alleviate any doubt. And Phalena Parichiyate, one of the things that is mentioned in the purport to that verse, I think 11.328 or 11.351, if the spiritual master doesn't alleviate those doubts, chances are that disciple will become discouraged and abandon their practice in due course. So choosing one's spiritual master is actually a very, very important decision. Phalena Parichiyate. Are they decorated with the symptoms of a sadhu? Are they someone who enlivens one in Krishna consciousness? Do they have that deep erudition such that they're representing the teachings in a way that alleviates doubts? Or, are they also grumpy? Are they also someone who is far too enamored with the things of this world? These things, Phalena Parichiyate, we have to see. Srila Prabhupada would say, regularly quoting from Adi-lila, Krishna Shakti Vina Nahe Tad Pravatan. Unless you're empowered, you can't spread the Sankirtan movement. And probably Srila Prabhupada's example is the most extraordinary example of an empowered person. How's it possible that someone could arrive in America at 69 with a couple of trunks of books and some cereal and 40 rupees, and within 12 years manifest a global movement? Others were still arguing, was Lord Chaitanya being poetic when he said Pritiviti Yachayata Naganadi Gram Savacha Prachar Hoibe Modna? Maybe this is poetry. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur were great poets. So when it comes to poetry, we have this expression, poetic license, that sometimes some exaggeration goes on, and devotees would debate like that. But Srila Prabhupada had such faith in the order of Krishna, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, his spiritual master, that he knew if he applied himself, that something wonderful would come out. Now we should be careful not to presume that the sheer scale of ISKCON is enough proof that it's healthy. We sometimes get this metaphor that if you pull out the plug from the fan, it'll still turn for a while. But there's no new power being added. Sooner or later that momentum will go. So we should be very careful and humble, like it's described here, not to think that the scale of ISKCON is something that we can take some kind of personal credit for. We should think of ourselves very much like Srila Prabhupada's dogs, that we're fortunate enough to be here, to have an owner, rather than just be strays. Previously we were waifs and strays. And whatever little paddling we can do, we can only undertake the great work of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. There's still plenty of villages out there that haven't yet been reached. We can only do that by the grace of Srila Prabhupada. But we should also see, how well have I imbibed the entire message of Srila Prabhupada? How well have I studied his books? How well can I represent those books in a way that awakens others' faith, in a way that enlivens? Phalena Parichiyate. Or have I become a little, spiritually flabby, where I'm not in that same sense of fitness to truly awaken others' faith and truly represent Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada showed us actually that we have to be prepared, if necessary, to alone be the torchbearer to pass things on to the next generation. Of course, he wasn't the sole torchbearer, but he demonstrated that if even he had to go to the other side of the world by himself without assistance, he would do it, and everything would come out nicely. So that's the faith. So we have to study Phalena Parichite. How well can I represent the great gift that Srila Prabhupada gave? Is my grasp of Siddhanta and my power of speaking such that it enlivens others in Krishna consciousness? Or have I got some planting to do, some sowing to do, some nurturing to do? I might stop here and see if there's any questions and comments. I think I dealt with most of the points in my preparation. Srila Prabhupada ki. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions or other comments to make?
Thank you so much for asking. My question is that sometimes within Krishna consciousness we're seeing a lot of people, they come, they join the movement, they spend years in the ashram, but then maybe people that go into the movement and then they leave, or they abandon these practices, or they stop following the instructions of the spiritual master, or their vows and things like that. I was wondering if it's the right mood to be fearful that in ourselves we might be in a position now where we feel inspired, we might feel like we're going to be doing this for the rest of our lives, but is it the right mood to stay fearful that we're going to leave, going to not be in that mood, or maybe throughout life you go and you leave, not living near a temple or something, and how we keep our association and keep up with our sadhana. So how do we, what's the right mood to take?
Yeah. Srila Prabhupada would say we're not half as frightened of Maya as we should be. He would call it sometimes like a razor's edge. Just a little inattention and you can cut yourself with a sharp razor. So absolutely, this spirit of recognizing that we're here by grace, if we become a little complacent, and particularly if we become a little judgmental, then we can actually forfeit that grace and realize just how susceptible to Maya's charms we are. So yes, being very diligent and attentive is absolutely important. Quite likely most people are going to may have an experience of awakening, and then will often plateau, maybe even slip back. This idea of always seeking out association, Srila Prabhupada would say, by surrounding yourself with live wires, that way you can actually keep your faith strong. Shraddha is nurtured by sadhu sangha. So there's a good chance if we don't create offenses and we maintain good association with devotees, openness towards devotees, serving devotees, respect, that even, if the firewood is damp, it can be reignited. It can, dry out and catch fire again. But we shouldn't be surprised. Srila Prabhupada would say, don't be surprised who goes, be surprised who stays. Nowadays people don't tend to leave. Back in the day, I think the expression bloop was, someone has left, they're back in the material ocean, bloop. And we invented our own verb. Although bloopers is now used when they're talking about outtakes of the films and so on. So who knows, maybe we've even influenced Hollywood. But don't be surprised who plateaus, could be another way of saying it. And that's why we're told, just read Srila Prabhupada's books every day. If we're not fortifying our intelligence to learn the discernment, where is Maya's intrigue? It's described, the weeds can actually look like the devotional creeper. If we've not developed great discernment, we could think that the adoration of others is a measure of our progression in Krishna consciousness. That's a really intoxicating one. And therefore we become a little slack or a little inattentive. Certainly Srila Prabhupada said if you chant 16 rounds every day, Krishna will protect you. Let's see how others might want to also, because it was such a nice question. Would others like to also say something on that?
The symptom we might not be spot on is that we don't have the association with it. We're bereft of the association, but you said that we should try and surround ourselves by live wires. So what happens if we find ourselves in a situation we can't access the association with it?
Well, this is why good association actually means a really favorable attitude towards devotees. So you could even still be in the thick of Vaishnavas, but if the attitude is more one of envy or enmity or thinking oneself proud, one could almost, it's like there's almost insulation wire around that live wire that actually impedes the signal coming through. Srila Prabhupada showed us that you can feel a very vital sense of connection even with someone who hasn't trodden the earth for 60 years or something, or 40 years, whatever it was, just by being really focused on their directions and that spirit of service. I would absolutely say that one of the things to monitor in one's own consciousness, if I've started to be attracted to criticism, and if I started to have a slight hostile mindset towards devotees, can't even tolerate hearing them being glorified, these would all be signs that something has gone, septic in our consciousness, and that we need to correct that. That's why it's often said, if, for instance, you find yourself developing aparad, the only cure is to fall at the feet of that devotee or those devotees, is to restore the spirit of honoring them. Actually, the word Shraddha we typically translate as faith, but it also means respect or appreciation. So that is the healthy mindset, and that allows the full charge to come through. But Srila Prabhupada would say we should be asking questions. We should be serving obediently. So association isn't just rubbing shoulders or, having informal, affectionate exchanges. Those things are nice. They're also favorable. But the stuff that will really accelerate our realization is pariprashna, asking humble inquiries of the devotees, seva, rendering service to the devotees. And that way we get enlivened. Yeah, if I've always got something else I prefer to do than be with the Vaishnavas, if when thinking of the Vaishnavas some dark thoughts come, these are all clues, right? Krishna Surya Sama Maya Haya Andhaka Jahan Krishna Tahan Nai Maya Radhika. If it's all gloom and cloudy and so on, and the sun of Krishna is a long way away and there's all obstacles in the way, whereas a sign that we're in good Krishna consciousness is we have the sun of Krishna is beaming away. There's an enlivenment, there's a light. And so appreciation of devotees, even the very act of expressing appreciation of devotees, typically enlivens the heart. And it's Krishna saying, yes, more of this. So being able to monitor based on these symptoms is actually such an important part. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur would say, every Ekadashi we should be taking stock. And these would be good yardsticks. Have I developed some more good qualities? How are my relationships with the Vaishnavas? These would all be good things to use as our yardstick. Other points, other questions? We still have maybe a couple of minutes before prasad. The only religion in the world where you get to associate with God as foodstuffs. Srila Prabhupada ki